Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I am your host, TheWriter, and this is the show where we sit here in front of a shelf full of gaming stuff and I tell you all my tabletop and role-playing game stories. Gosh, when we last left off, Sally lost her paladin powers after she got bribed with 10,000 gold to be Lord Minor's whore for the night. And she went shopping and got all these new things, mostly things that the other players wouldn't especially notice, like small things like rings and potions, a slightly better helmet, etc., that if they didn't really look over her or like check out her character sheet or something, they weren't going to notice it right away. But now Sally is without her powers, and if any of her party members find out, in character or out of character, they are obligated by one of Gunther's laws, their god's laws, to kill her. And where did I put the cue card with all of Gunther's laws on it? I don't know. I did a bunch of cleaning earlier and I misplaced them. Oh well. I went over them in the first episode, but one of them was suffer not the fallen. So if a cleric or a paladin loses their powers or does something so awful that Gunther casts them down from good grace, you're not on his team anymore and you're not going to be alive for much longer. So Sally has to keep this hush-hush even from her fellow party members. So she's going to have this sitting in the back of her mind for the rest of the campaign, so she could die at any time. You know, if somebody asks her to cast a healing spell or to bless a weapon or anything like that, she's going to be on edge, and she can't take any more levels in Paladin, so she's going to have to like do levels in Knight or Fighter, something that's not going to draw a lot of attention to her. So she's very like, she doesn't let anybody see her character sheet. She's throwing her dice out and all kinds of stuff like that to keep it on the down low. But anyway, I was remembering that Big Ben was very disappointed that they didn't get to fight the 40 or 50 zombies that were out in front of the church last time, so I promised them a bloodier second session. But before that, of course, we have to go see Lord Minor, because he's the slime ball, the benefactor, the brains of this operation, who's kind of directing the paladins, because he's a local and he's got a ton of money and a ton of resources that he's giving them. So he's kind of got the say-so while they're in his backyard, while they're using his mansion as a base, etc., etc. And Jessica, our new player, decides that she's going to go see Lord Minor in the early morn while everybody else is getting breakfast, gearing up, sharpening their swords, etc., because they're going to go on an extermination mission either way. But Jessica decides that she's going to go see him because she has questions. And this caught me completely off guard because between sessions, Jessica did a lot of thinking, a lot of like outside-the-box thinking. After they met Lord Minor and they learned like how he thinks and what about the town and what about the people that he doesn't give a damn about. And she thought, if Lord Minor just wants the town destroyed or dead, why didn't he just encourage us to blow the place up or burn it to the ground? Or, why is he so adamant about us searching for survivors if he was letting the town wilt on the vine economically anyways? So she goes, into his, up into his study or his office or whatever. It doesn't seem like the man ever leaves his work desk. And she goes, Lord Minor, a word, please. And he goes, of course, Madam Paladin. And he looks up from all the paperwork and things that he's doing. And he goes, Jessica says, Lord Minor, what is it about the town below that you've got all these paladins running about through it? And he goes, what do you mean? And she says, why do you care? And he says, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, if you wanted the entire town dead, you could have just let the zombies run around and eat everyone and not call all the paladins. And though I understand you don't want a zombie plague spreading across the entire continent, the paladins would have noticed pretty quickly anyway, so why not let the town consume itself, and then once the problem's gotten bad enough, the paladins would have swooped in on their own. So I do wonder, Lord Minor, since we're sending in cells of paladins, who exactly are you hoping will come out of this town alive? And just, she blew the lid off this guy's motivations. Session 2. And I was like, damn it, I wasn't going to reveal this until way later. And he kind of looks at her and he straightens his papers and he takes off his reading glasses and he sets his quill in the ink file and he goes, come over here to the window with me. And he puts like a long, like cold-handed arm around her and he goes over to the window. And he goes, do you see that gardener down there? And they gesture to like the back gardens because his office is in a corner of the mansion. And he goes, you see that gardener down there? He came to me with 3,000 gold of gambling debt, and his debt collectors kidnapped his wife and child, or his wife and 2 children, demanding that his debt be repaid or they would never see each other again. And he came to me and said, please help save my family. And Jessica goes, yeah, so? And I told him to eat dog shit, that he'd made his bed, now he could sleep in it. He came back the next day with a handful of dog shit and ate it in front of me. And Jessica's like, oh, God. And Lord Minor goes, so I paid his $3,000 of debt and got his wife and children back. Now he works for me, paying off that 3,000 gold. And he goes, do you see that girl over there who's tending to the horses? And Jessica goes, yeah. Says, well, she was going through a particularly dark and scary part of the wood in this region, and her horse and carriage got jumped on by bandits, and she was passed around like a party favor, and then left for dead on the roadside. All of her horse was stolen, her carriage was hacked apart and used as firewood, everything she was transporting was stolen and sold on the black market, etc., etc. And she came to me for help. So I sent some hired swords out into the forest and had all of those bandits that gang raped her brought into my stables and beheaded in front of her. No law enforcement, no kingsmen, no guards, just quietly destroyed. And now she works for me. She tends to my horses and she graces my bed, once every 6 weeks or so. I enjoy being in control of people, especially when they know how much control I have of the world around me. And Jessica goes, what does this have to do with what I just asked you? Stop telling me all these god-awful stories. And Jessica kind of glances at the maid in the corner, wondering, what horrible thing happened to this woman to put her in Lord Minor's employ, and she doesn't want to know. And he goes, well, I enjoy having control over people, and I enjoy flexing the control that all this, all the money I have, all the resources and people in my employ, I don't like being under anyone else's influence. And Jessica stops for a moment and she goes, is there somebody in that town that has influence over you that you think might still be alive? And he goes, there was one person who dared try to take me into his household after my father died and tried to bring me up as an orphan, that he didn't think that I could run my family's empire. I was, again, 12 or 13 at the time, but I had enough servants to look after me until I became a man. He tried to force me, contacted local dukes, he even sent a letter to the king himself, saying that I should be brought up in an orphanage among other children and that he would have power over me and thusly all of my vast, vast wealth. And he dared try rip me from my household after it came apart around me. And Jessica kind of her brow kind of knits, and she goes, he may have just been trying to take care of you as a child. And he goes, I didn't need care. I understand the way people think. People are very simple, Lady Paladin. They're very simple creatures. Food, sex, money. That's all people ever think about. There's nothing, there are very few categories of things that people try to go after in life in general. And Jessica's like, she's starting to feel sorry for this asswipe, but at the same time all the crap that he's saying is really freaking offensive. So she's like on the fence about like just smacking him over the head and like saying she's sorry for all the crap that happened to him. And he goes, if you can find this orphanage patron, this, he's not quite a priest, but something close to it, and bring him back to me so he doesn't. And then Lord Minor kind of pauses for a second, and Jessica kind of narrows her eyes, and she goes, what did he do to you? And Lord Minor kind of looks to one side and he goes, it's none of your business. Bring him to me and I'll pay you off for it. It's just, think of it as a bounty, if you will. And he goes, do you intend to kill him? Have him locked in your dungeon? He goes, my mansion doesn't have dungeons. And he goes, you know what I mean. If I bring this man to you, what are you going to do? And Lord Minor goes, he'll pay for his crimes. For any crimes he may have committed against any other child. And it goes over Jessica like a wave very suddenly about what he's implying. And he goes, I was lucky. I had loyal servants willing to act as my guardians and stand-ins while I was that age. And he's kind of drumming his fingers really quick. And he's looking to one side. He's not looking at her anymore. And he goes, if he's still alive, if you can find evidence of his death, great. If he's still alive, bring him in. Or better yet, take his head off. That'd be great justice for me. And Jessica kind of falls silent. And she looks at her, like out of character, looks at her Gunther holy book that says justice, not vengeance. And this is starting to sound a lot like vengeance. But he writes her a receipt that says 15,000 gold on it and has an artist's rendering. Why he has an artist's rendering of this guy ready, I don't know. Maybe when he saw the paladins coming, he figured he could hitch a ride with one of them to see that this guy was seen to for his crimes. And Jessica takes the wanted poster and looks at it, and it's like a middle-aged guy with a green bowler hat and, relatively nice, like low-level noble duds who runs this orphanage. Kind of unusual, since usually there would be like a matron, a woman running things. But this one was run by a man. I don't remember the logic behind that one. Maybe it was a couple and his wife died or something like that, but there are shadowy implications going on there, and Jessica has to decide what she's going to do with this knowledge. And he goes, keep it to yourself, and I'll pay you in full. So he promises her 15,000 gold if she will either kill or bring this guy to him to be killed. And, things are going back and forth in her head. Can a paladin act as judge, jury, and executioner? Should she? Is that justice? Is it vengeance? Is it something else entirely? Could you, suffer that kind of evil and not put it down immediately? Are people like that worth due process? And if they do get due process, is it within the reach of, a foot soldier, a paladin, to put this guy down for what he's done? Or do you bring him in to rot in jail for the rest of his life? Do you set it right, or do you make yourself feel better and, get 15,000 gold in the meantime? So I have laid a trap for Jessica, because Jessica, as I told you in the first part, is going to college to be a kindergarten teacher. So I know this is very, very close to her heart, very relevant to her interest, taking care of small children. I put a pedophile in front of her and said, go get him, to see what she would do. and see if she could resist just killing him or bringing him in to be executed, or if she would turn him into other paladins. Lord Minor is basically acting as witness, from 10, 15, 20 years ago about some impropriety going on. And now that he's got somebody he thinks will run just for him to go kill this guy, the children are more than likely gone or chewed up at this point. So if he's there, what will Jessica do? And I was like, this is the most perfect trap I can lay for a woman like Jessica. She's very level-headed, but she has very, very few buttons like that I can push. So Sally's weakness was using sex as a weapon. Jessica's weakness is small children and taking care of them. So again, very unfair and setting her up to fail, but that was the point of this campaign, was the human condition behind it. God, it's so hot. I'm sorry. So they go out on their extermination mission, and Sally, strangely enough, decides to take up Longbow because she doesn't want to take away the glory from Big Ben and Fast Ben, who are both melee fighters, and she gets the not the feat. She does something to where it helps if she shoots into melee, so she's not taking as big of a penalty. She's like, well, I don't want to just be in there and be in people's way. The only thing is, though, because she's not a paladin anymore, if she gets scratched by a zombie, she's doomed. So she's got to stay back. But she's covering her tracks really well. The Big Ben's like, yeah, I'll be your shield, and you can shoot over my shoulder and stuff like that. We've got to have a party lineup anyway, so I was going to pick up bow and arrow, but yeah, that's fine, you do it. I'll just buy a better shield later when we're doing stuff and upgrading all of our equipment. So they buy it entirely. Sally's secret is safe for now. And they go down to the barrier, they show their papers, they go in, now level 2 paladins. Woo! And they go by the church and they see that the crowd of zombies is still milling around. So they go up onto the second floor of not a convenience store, but a one-story building, and they get up on the roof and they pull out their bow and arrows and their crossbows, and they just start shooting down into the crowd. Now the zombies are not fast enough or smart enough to take cover or get up into the building and onto the roof that they're on. So they get 40, 50 free zombie kills because they brought enough arrows, enough ammunition. They were taking careful aim. I'm like, okay, you disperse the crowd of zombies without having to run through them with your swords. Very good. A good chunk of XP for you guys. And they go, well, we should thoroughly check the graveyard just in case, because there could be zombies in the tool shed or in the mausoleums and stuff. We just gotta clean the place out, because a graveyard is going to be the highest concentration of undead if everything that was dead in the town rose up. So they check mausoleums. They find a couple of undead Dobermans, straight out of Resident Evil, and they fight those and hack them up. And then, while they're going through the gravekeeper's shack, where he sleeps and keeps all of his shovels and stuff, they come across a stitched abomination, 5 or 6 bodies worth of muscle and sinew all stitched together. It's got a cleaver and a sword and a mace, and it's got 4 arms, so it's gonna knock the crap out of anything that gets close enough. And Big Ben's like, yes, boss fight, and he runs up there to do battle with this thing, and it knocks him right on his ass with a critical hit. First hit, he's like, ah, damn, heals. So Sally has to carefully sidestep the call for healing, and Jessica throws down the heal on her turn, and they fight this thing back and forth, and it's 4-on-1 at level 2. So they kind of hack it apart after a while, and then the arms are still alive, so the arms are crawling up onto rocks and trying to swing at them with some intelligence. And they're like, Jesus, this thing just keeps coming apart. And then they slice it down the middle of its chest, and like 4 or 5 individual zombies pop out, and they've got to fight those zombies too. And they just like keep slicing it into smaller and smaller pieces until finally it all stops moving. And they're like, Jesus, that was goddamn. And they pick up the cleaver and the sword and the mace, and they are in fact upgrades. So they grab them. It's like, we can have these blessed later, and they put them in their bags. And Big Ben looks over at me with this kind of shit-eating grin. He's like, well, GM, you have tipped your hand. And I go, what do you mean, Ben? He goes, well, stitched abominations don't just spring up out of the ground like zombies from a zombie plague. They have to be crafted like golems. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, that means there's either an alchemist or a necromancer running around. And I was like, that's a pretty good assumption. And behind my DM screen, I'm like, damn it. He's right, I did tip my hand kind of quick. Because somebody has to make and, sew up a stitched abomination. So there is an intelligence behind the zombie plague. It's not just a sickness. Somebody, smashed a vial of nastiness in the local well, and then overnight everybody became zombies. Or the river or whatever, and then took charge of a large number of bodies and turned them into this nastiness that was running around in the graveyard. And they search the gravekeeper's shack, and they find books and notes and charts and things like that. And it's like, this doesn't look like something a gravekeeper would keep, because there's like math and alchemy running around on this. And I was like, well, you're paladins, so you're not going to know any of these necromantic sigils and things like that. None of them had enough ranks in knowledge arcana or use magic device or anything like that. And they're like, okay, is there a journal or a diary or anything? And I say, yes, you find a book that's full of notes and plans, but you can only make out this book belongs to on the first page. It is by someone named the Stitcher. And they go, the Stitcher, like the stitched abomination we just chopped up? And they go, yes, the Stitcher. And he goes, oh, that's a cool name. It's got some menace to it. It's like the Shadow. And I go, yes, the Stitcher, apparently working straight from this graveyardman's shack, either killed the gravekeeper and took his place, or waited until he was on vacation or something, and moved right in here before enacting the zombie plague. Now, whether he's still around or not is unknown, because it's still a plague. You can still catch it yourself, so he may have just set off the proverbial bomb and then run for it. But they're scratching their chins, and they're like, to what end, though? Because they're trying to give me some benefit of the doubt that it's not Lord Minor, that I would have more than one named NPC running around. And I go, well, it's hard to tell, because there are all kinds of reasons to wipe a town off the map. Maybe he had plenty of enemies, maybe he was shunned as a child, maybe there's 1,000 reasons that somebody could come back and use dark magic on a large number of people. I mean, if they were torch and pitchforking their way up to that mansion because, a little girl was predicting the weather and they didn't like that, they may have torch and pitchforked somebody else, and their child came back to enact this nasty, nasty revenge. And they're like, God, you're right. Okay, so they've killed a bunch of zombies, they had their boss fight, and now they need to look for more survivors, because that's one of the big points for this, was exterminate zombies, look for survivors. And they're like, okay, if we want any money out of this today, we need to find some people. They were like, okay, so if we were in a zombie apocalypse, where would be a good place to hide? And, Fast Ben goes, the home improvement store. And, Big Ben goes, the mall. And Sally goes, a food court. And they're thinking of all these places that don't exist in this town. So they think for a while, and then Jessica quietly goes, an orphanage? And all three of them look over at her and go, an orphanage? they go, yeah. I mean, Lord Minor was technically an orphan. She's keeping this meeting she had secret. And she goes, well, Lord Minor was technically orphaned when his mother and his mother and sister were burned at the stake, and his father went mad and is in an asylum a few towns over. So surely there may have been other children without parents in this town. And they go, yeah, you're right. And they all look at me and go, is there an orphanage in this town? And I go, yes, there is. And they go, well, if we could rescue a large group of children, that'd be great. And they're gung-ho for this. They love this. So they pull up their map because they've got a complete map of this town. And goddamn if I didn't save it, because I built an entire town and then put it on a grid board and then didn't keep it for my records. I didn't even map out Ocean Rim. And I didn't freaking keep this one because designing towns sucks. It sucks hard. And if you've ever tried to do it, Lord have mercy. It's so much effort for so little payback. But darn if I didn't try. So they find the orphanage and they're hacking down zombies as they go. There's a few dogs here and there. There's, again, the challenge rating 1/3 zombies that wander out that they shoot with their crossbows. It starts raining, the random travel events as they're walking across town, and they pass the Gothic bell tower that keeps time for the entire town. And sure enough, at the end of one of the streets, they find a small, run-down 2-story orphanage. And I kind of glance over at Jessica, and she's serious face. And I was like, this is it. This is where Jessica's gonna decide to take this guy's fucking head off, because this is exactly the bait that would lure her into this trap. So I'm dangling, I think it's Gunther's 8th law in front of her, justice, not vengeance. Because if she just decides to kill a fucker, that's not gonna go over well, because being an executioner is not something a paladin is for. I mean, yeah, if he runs out and he's like, I'm a pedophile, and pulls a longsword on them, then yeah, they can kick his ass. But if he's just hiding in a broom closet somewhere hoping to not get eaten by zombies, if she just runs him through, that's not going to be good. So, and I know this is going to draw up so many freaking arguments, because, pedophile is pretty much lowest of the low. It's hard to go to sink any deeper than that. But due process for all people's good and evil is the only way to have a lawful society. So this is not Judge Dredd, where you can just decide somebody's crimes, decide their punishment, and or just shoot a fucker as soon as you see him. So I'm waiting to see if Jessica will fall for this, and I'm 90% sure that she will, because this is the one thing that would make her do that. So they wander up to this orphanage, and they see that all the shutters are drawn, and there's a stopper under the door, like a wedge of wood, and they're like, they may have boarded themselves in. So they take out their crossbows and they check the street for any wandering zombies. Then they're like, okay, who's going to stand guard? Because if there's a bunch of civilians in here, we need to be on the lookout. Because as soon as we start making noise, a whole bunch of zombies is going to come out of the woodwork. I just know it. And Fast Ben goes, I'll do it. So he stands there with his crossbow. I think he spent a bunch of money and got like a +1 crossbow. He's like, they won't get close enough. They're challenge rating 1/3 or 1/2 zombies. One shot will be enough. I can stand here and play tower defense while you guys are looking for children to rescue. And so Big Ben steps up and he kicks the door in. And it just it goes down hard because it's been raining and all the wood is swollen and old and nasty. And he steps inside. He's like, is there anybody alive in here? And he hears a bunch of people scurrying around. And sure enough, he leans around the corner and there's 6 or 7 kids. 6 or 7 kids, their ribs are showing. They've got the big wet eyes. They're They're freaking terrified. They're probably starving, all just like piled in this corner. And sure enough, in one of the other rooms is the patron that Jessica was told about, with the green bowler hat and the nice, semi-nice clothes. Well, not so nice anymore. They're all ragged and torn up. And Jessica kind of does like the memory check to make sure this is the guy. There's only just the one adult here, and with 7 kids, they've chewed through all their food, and this was kind of their last stand, was just keeping the door shut and keeping the windows boarded and trying not to make any noise. And they go, paladins of Gunther, we are here to rescue you. And, we are the knights in shining armor, like from your fairy tale storybooks. Isn't that cool? And trying to get these children excited so they'll come out of the corners and be rescuable, because I've talked with enough firefighters to know that there are some people that really struggle when you're trying to rescue them for whatever reason, whether they left something behind or whether they don't want to be taken out the way you're taking them out, etc., etc. Rescuing people that don't want to be rescued is hard. So Big Ben is trying to play the big, like, comic book hero for these kids to look up to, so that they'll follow him out into the zombie-filled street and they can get out of there. And Jessica, while they're gathering up all the children and the patron, I think his name was like Godric or something like that. I gave him a really generic fantasy name. Godric goes, God, we haven't seen anyone in weeks, and we just ran out of food like 3 days ago. We're all starving. Do you have any food? And of course they pass out rations so nobody keels over. And Jessica's like, are you... and she kind of has him aside. Are you Godric so-and-so? And he goes, yes, I am. While the rest of the party is distracted. How would Jessica know him by name? Well, she shouldn't. But she confirms that this is the guy that Lord Minor was talking about. And she decides that she's going to go search the rest of the house. Oh, there are no more children. There are only 7 of us. Well, I'm going to go check just in case somebody came in like through an upper window or something and is hiding. I'm going to go check for more survivors. And she goes looking for like evidence. And there's really nothing. In medieval times, there's no such thing as child pornography or anything that would have given this away. But he does find a slip of rope in Godric's bedroom under the mattress. And he's like, there's no reason for an 18-inch slip of rope to be in a man's bedroom, especially when he has... I was about to say when he has no wife, but that sounds kind of kinky to say out loud. But... especially if he lives by himself and takes care of children for a living. So Jessica's got, the implication, again, is kind of there. And she checks his sheets, sure enough, stains. All the wrong stains in all the wrong areas. And, who, in medieval times, who are these kids going to go to? They're already orphans and nobody wants them. The Duke's guard wanders through once a month to make sure the place isn't on fire, and Lord Minor's mansion overlooks this entire place like a great vulture. These kids were in a bad spot. And Jessica's like, yeah, this fucker's going down. Okay, everybody, and she comes downstairs, and she's got the slip of rope in her inventory, and I was like, oh my god, she's gonna fucking hang him from the nearest tree. This is gonna be amazing. And, she goes, Godric, you forgot this on your way out. And she kind of like gently drapes the 18 inches of rope around his neck like she's going to tie a tie for him. And he goes just a little bit pale, and their eyes meet for just a moment. And I can already tell, like, Jessica is ready to just fucking strangle this guy in front of Gunther, her friends, and all these children. And I was like, this is going to be great. And she goes, okay, let's go. And so I'm like, oh, damn. And so Big Ben and Fast Ben, take point, and they've both got their crossbows. And Sally's got her longbow because she can't go meleeing zombies. And then Big Ben notices this and takes up his sword and shield instead, in case there's a fast zombie, because they're thinking about zombie movies. And they go, okay, we're going to make for the nearest barrier, the nearest way out of town. And so they walk the whole way. And, they have to, make the travel checks and roll for X number of zombies to just kind of shoot in the head and get 10, 15 XP as they go, just to make sure that they're awake and not allowing the children to run around this way and that. They have to, it's like herding cats. My fiance Bree, watches children for a living at a program that's kind of like the YMCA, but better. And she says it's like herding cats. You have to make hapaya. You have to teach them day after day how to line up. So they lead this group of 7 kids and this pedophile that was keeping them at this orphanage down, street after street, alley after alley, and they finally get out, relatively unharassed. They're making noise, so they draw a few zombies out, but not enough to really be threatening. And they make it to the edge, and they're like, look, we found 7 kids and a grown man, isn't that great? And and Big Ben and Fast Ben escort the children out. They get checked out by the people to make sure that they don't have any scratches or wounds. And just as a side note, you can imagine how awkward it is to look a child over for bites and scrapes and bruises. And sure enough, one of the boys has man-sized hand bruises on his back, and Jessica is seething, and she's looking over at Godric. And she looks over, and Godric knows that she knows. And while these regular healing spells are being passed around by the others, she's like, she knows. And she's trying to decide what to fucking do with this guy, because she's not taking him back. And she can't give him to Lord Minor because that's unlawful. He is not the law here. And she goes, Godric, come with me. I'm sure we can have someone else see to you while all the children are fed and clothed and etc., etc. And she kind of takes him by the shoulder to one side to a different tent. And I was like, she's going to cut his fucking throat. This is going to be great. And she goes, Lieutenant, come with me, just to, make sure I don't do anything with poor Mr. Godric while we're examining him medically. And I was like, what is she doing now? I don't really know. And as soon as the lieutenant, closes the tent flap, Jessica grabs this guy by the wrist and ties his wrists with the rope and, just extra knot. I think she, used rope or something. Or is there a used rope in Pathfinder? I think there is. But she rolled really high to knot this guy up. And she speaks in, terse sentences and explains to the lieutenant just what's been going on here. And she goes, take him away. I never want to see him again. Make sure he's freaking put in a dungeon. I don't care if he sees these kids again. If he sees the light of day, you will answer to me. And, Jessica's a foot soldier. She has absolutely no authority, but she's got a damn high intimidate roll. And the lieutenant nods and, takes this guy by the scruff of the neck and takes him away, because they do keep cage carts in case there's, law breaking or brawling or whatever. It's basically like the old circus, keep the tiger in this boxcar kind of thing with bars. And they throw the guy in there and slam the gate, and they put the padlock on, and there's a plaque. There's a plaque that is blank. And Jessica goes over and she takes out her spare thigh dagger that, if she gets disarmed, and she carves into the plaque, pedophile. And then she initials the bottom, and then she signs off on the paperwork, and she tells, X, Y, and Z, paladin soldiers exactly what went on and all the evidence she found and the words of Lord Minor, which were to be kept hush-hush. So she kept that into the bargain. And she goes, this better be the last time I ever see you, Godric. The last time. And Godric, of course, is as pale as a sheet. His nastiness is brought to bear. He's going before judge, before jury, whatever kind of law system they've got for this foulness. And Jessica delivered him to the best authority she could think of without just straight up killing a fucker. I was very impressed. So temptation though there may have been, Jessica did not fall. Because justice outweighs vengeance in the eyes of Gunther. And I just kind of gave that slow nod, that very impressed, for a new player especially. For somebody who had never played Pathfinder before, I put the worst sort of evil I could possibly imagine. And no armor, 5 hit points. He was a civilian. She could have taken him out in 1 hit. But she took the high road because it was not her place to exact justice or vengeance on this guy. To pass him to the proper authorities was the best thing she could have done. Because, it's not written in the 10 laws of Gunther, but, judge not lest you be judged. Well, she judged him in her head, but physically she passed him off to a greater authority than her own, and that was the best thing she could have done. So Jessica maintained her paladin powers through her, primary trial, I suppose. I set out specific trials throughout this campaign to tempt a particular paladin each way. And when Jessica found out one of Lord Minor's secrets and had the ability to strike it rich like Sally did, even though they don't know about that, she resisted and, stayed pure, stayed upright. And I was like, that is the best paladin-ing I have seen in a long time. So, well done. Congratulations. Jessica, I wouldn't have done that. I would have gladly ran a fucker through and said, we only found the 7 kids. And I would have fallen because I have no tolerance for that. If I had the means and the steel, he wouldn't have walked out of that damn building. Those kids would have never seen him again. And, well, they won't now, but they would have known that he wasn't going to walk out of that building. Not under my nose. So Jessica kind of has that long sigh of relief that this great weight has come off her shoulders. And Lord Minor finds out about this, that this guy has been brought to justice. And he doesn't give her any money because, he didn't die and she didn't bring him to her for his own vengeance. So he scoffs at her softness, but he doesn't, bring her out in front of everybody and say, this guy was a pedophile and he touched me when I was a child and I told her to bring him in and she didn't. He's not going to go announce that to everyone because it's one of his humiliations from his early life. So he's going to keep that bottled up and very unsavory and, makes him part of the slime ball that he actually is. But he's evil, but there's some sympathetic bits in there. He is a fully realized character, and he's only the product of his own upbringing. So Godric got his hands on Lord Minor, if only briefly, before his servants came, and probably found a loophole in some paperwork somewhere that they could be his guardians until he came of age. So and then, they get paid for all the zombies they killed. They get paid double for bringing the kids back. So, let's see, 7 times 100 is 700, times 2 was 1,400 gold, split 4 ways. That was pretty great. And then, they got XPs from killing all the zombies and XPs for killing the stitched horror and XPs for the missions, so they leveled up to like 3 or 4 straight away. They got a lot of XPs because they got a lot of stuff done. And Big Ben suddenly puts both of his hands on the table, and he goes, "Tony, does Pathfinder have lover's comfort?" And I go, "What?" And he goes, "Lover's comfort, you know, from Skyrim?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Yeah, when you sleep with your wife, or you sleep with anyone, in Skyrim, you get a buff called Lover's Comfort, where you get like a 5% increase to stuff for like 8 hours or whatever it happens to be. Does Pathfinder have anything like that?" And I'm kind of scratching my head. I'm like, "No, I don't think so." He's like, "Could we have that?" And I go, I guess. And I kind of glance at Sally, because I know as soon as I say yes to this, they're going to exploit it. But 5% in a D20 is a +1, so it's not going to break the game open. And I go, "Well, we had a successful mission today, so Fast Ben and I are going to grab Sally and have a threesome when the night is dark." And I'm just, "You were planning this, weren't you?" And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "Fine." And Jessica kind of looks over like, "And I didn't get invited?" "No." And he goes, "Well, if it was a foursome, then it would just be 2 pairs." And I was like, "Oh, I don't want to try to go into their logic why they had a threesome and not a foursome, because that's a completely different mindset that I don't want to get into." So Fast Ben and Big Ben take Sally off to one side after their mission is over, after their papers are signed, to have a nice sloppy threesome in their tents somewhere. And I go, "Okay, Lover's Comfort is going to be like the first D20 roll you make the next day will be a +1. You know, and you've probably heard me use that in other D&D stories. You know, Fudo slept with Stands with a Fist, so you get Lover's Comfort. Or, so-and-so slept with so-and-so, so you get Lover's Comfort. +1 to your next D20 roll." That, this threesome is where that originated from. So, while Big Ben and Fast Ben are Eiffel Towering Sally, Jessica kind of goes off on her own to kind of contemplate, because this is her first campaign, and this is some pretty heavy material, pedophiles and zombies and stitched horrors and really horny party members. It can get to be a bit much. So she goes to like meditate and pray, and one of the captains comes over and says, "Lady Paladin, are you all right? Have you seen a bit too much action today? Should we give you a few days off?" And she goes, yeah, I think so. I would appreciate a few days off." And she's sitting there, and all the kids are there, gobbling stew and whatever else they've got, like no tomorrow. And, Godric's face is in the back of her head. "Why didn't I just kill that guy? It would have felt great. It would have rid the world of this foul evil." And she goes and she sits among the children, this girl who's going to be a kindergarten teacher in real life. And these kids look up to her like a freaking superhero. And I thought, wow, that's a paladin. What's a paladin? That's a paladin. Jessica is a paladin. And I think that was where that session left off, at least that particular chapter. So that's the end of that story, and I will see you guys next time on D&D Stories. Keep gaming.
Hi guys, T here. Remember to hit that like button for me on your way out. If you'd like to see artwork and maps from my gaming table, check out the D&D Stories Facebook page. Also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to toss a few gold pieces into your humble bard's hat. Links in the description below. Keep gaming!